Hi everybody, it's Angie B here, the creator of the creative process. Today's episode is slightly different from what I usually do. Today I'm talking about your mental health matters along with two special guest panelists. This is a disclaimer that I am not a mental health professional just yet, and I give a lot of my opinions, also with some of my education, things that I'm learning in class. But that means that I'm just starting the conversation because it's a conversation that we all should have at our dinner tables, within our circles of friends, within our families, you name it, even at work, if it's appropriate. We should bring awareness to the topic of mental health because, like I like to say often, that there's a thin line between sanity and insanity, and we all could use self-care tools, knowing how to identify when some things aren't feeling just quite right, so on and so forth. So we're going to get into this conversation. If you know someone who can benefit from this convo, tag them below. Share this to your page. But most of all, I challenge you to continue the conversation, continue self-education, continue breaking the stigma off of mental health and mental illness. It's not that scary, y'all. It's real, and we need to know about these things. So enough of me talking. Let's get right on into this conversation. Thank you so much for watching today. Well, welcome to today's episode of the creative process. Yes, I am shifting and I'm doing things a little different on today. I have special guests, but we're talking about your mental health matters because it does. I think that this is a topic, and we are going to discuss topics that are so important, but I don't think we talk about them enough. We're going to cover many different topics such as depression, maybe anxiety, suicide, coping skills. So I just really want you to stay tuned, share this, like it, tag some people underneath this live because I feel like so many great things, so many great gems are going to be dropped on today. So who am I? My name is Angela Beasley, but I also go by Angie B, and I am the creator and the host of the creative process. The creative process came to me during the pandemic. We all experienced it. We all are going through it together. We are not alone. You are not alone. You are not going through this thing alone. We are all experiencing it. So the way it came to me was, we had and have a lot of time at home, but actually during the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of time to be at home and to think about, everything that's going on. We had to stay home. We had to quarantine. Nobody knew how you contracted COVID-19. Nobody knew anything. And during my time at home, I had time to encounter God and to listen, and creativity actually started to flow. Picture that during a time of uncertainty and fear and etc. Creativity just began to flow, and I told God, when I saw people dying left and right all around me, I told God, hey, I have so many gifts and talents that you've given me. I have dreams and goals. I have creative ideas that I have sat on long enough, and now it's time to birth it. So if you allow me to live and survive this thing, I'm going to go. I'm going to do what you said to do. I'm going to run hard. I'm going to birth these things. So that's how the creative process was birthed. Now, again, we're shifting on today. We're talking about your mental health matters because it does. And I have two amazing guests on today. So my first guest that I'm introducing, her name is Dominique Lewis Lemier. She is a licensed professional counselor and also a doctoral student. She's studying to become a doctor. So that's awesome. Dominique Lemier is a wife, a mother, a sister, a daughter, and a counselor. She graduated from Xavier University of Louisiana, where she earned her bachelor and master's degrees. She's currently pursuing her doctorate degree at the University of Holy Cross. She's ministered in many different ways as a worship leader, a psalmist, a teacher. She's not only a minister in God's church, but also in her profession. She is a licensed professional counselor working daily with individuals and families, and especially the severely and persistently mentally ill. Recently, she has opened her own agency, Renewed Minds Counseling and Wellness, where she aims to help others heal from their past. She believes her current mission is to address mental health stigma in the African American faith community, believing that you can love Christ and counseling. Despite Dominique's secular success, her personal motto is taken from 1 Corinthians 15 and 10. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me has not been in vain. But I labored more abundantly than they all, yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. Pray with her as she fulfills the call of God. Hey, Dominique, how are you today?
Hi, Angie. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being on. So now I'm going to introduce our next panelist so we can get into this conversation, okay?
Mhm.
Franklin Davis Ford is Berkeley the artist, a singer, songwriter, actor, author, and vocal coach. Trained formally at my alma mater, Dillard University, with a BA in vocal performance. Berkeley also earned his master's in speech communication at Minnesota State University. He is a 2017 and 2018 Billboard charting recording artist as former lead vocalist and songwriter of Waterseed. Additional credits include vocal production, songwriting for Emmy-nominated Tisha Campbell and Les Twins. Berkeley is a featured soloist on Tank and the Bangas' remake of What the World Needs Now, featuring PJ Morton and David Shaw of The Revivalists. Tours include international Chinese and Korean pop stars Janae Zhang and Anna Lee. He's also placed in BET's Sunday's Best Top 10 in 2010. With strong roots in soul, gospel, and classical music, he offers a unique and brilliant sound to his singing and songwriting. Berkeley's EP is entitled Capricorn, released December 2019. He is a professor of pop commercial music at Loyola University in New Orleans, and he's currently developing a television show called The Red Sofa, based off of his upcoming book, How I Got Over. Welcome, Berkeley the artist. How are you today?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having me. Hello,
Of
ladies.
course. Thank
Hi.
you so much. So let's jump straight on into this conversation. I usually have people define what creativity is for me, but since we're talking about mental health, Dominique, I'm going to have you to explain to me what is mental illness.
Okay. So when I consider mental illness, first I want to say that to me, mental health exists on a continuum. It's like a spectrum, and so mental health is measured on one side of in the middle and further towards one side of the spectrum, but mental illness is on the other side of the spectrum. Whereas people have done all that they know how to do, they're doing the best that they know how to do, but they're still not getting at it any better. If symptoms that they're experiencing may exist over a longer period of time, or if they're having some type of chemical, biological basis for what they're experiencing, then they may be more ill on the spectrum than the more healthy side. And so one isn't necessarily better than the other. To me, it just exists on this spectrum.
Thank you so much for that. So now, Berkeley, I want you to define what is mental health to you.
Mental health for me, I would constitute as being aligned with your particular specific purpose and essence, which is going to be different for every single individual. Um, I feel like when we are aligned with why we are here and what purpose we have here, then we can easily operate with a strong sense of purpose and with a strong sense of attitude, emotionally, physically, mentally, and I would constitute that as mental health because again, it varies, like my sister said earlier, on the spectrum, and I think that that's important to remember because what may be constituted as a completely healthy individual for you may not be the same for someone else. So really identifying with your personal purpose and reasoning for being on the planet is during this lifetime. I think when you're aware of that and you're clear on that, it yields mental health.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, I think that mental health and conversations around mental illness are things that we need to talk about more within our communities, within our families, because I feel as if, as she's mentioned, it's a spectrum. I feel like there is a working definition for
Mhm.
both aspects, but it's so broad and it's such a big topic and it's so many different areas to cover. So that's why conversations like this need to happen so people can understand, because there are stigmas and there are misconceptions surrounded around mental illness and mental health. And a lot of times when we think about mental health, we automatically tag mental illness.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's looked at as a negative thing.
Mhm.
So I'm glad to be having this conversation with
Yeah.
you all about these things on today. Now let's talk about it. Let's talk about it because with everything going on in our world right now, I know personally for me, uh, with the pandemic and all the uncertainty and the fear and the anxiety that arose within me. And I know I'm not the only one. We're all going through this together, with the pandemic happening and then George Floyd and processing that. I didn't even know him, but I realized that I was grieving his death, dealing with those kind of things. With dealing with a full plate, juggling things, being busy. Dominique, I know you're a licensed professional counselor. You have a brand new, beautiful baby. Congratulations, by the
Thank
way.
you.
Pursuing a doctorate, you're a mom, a wife, all those things. Berkeley, you are a professor. You're a vocal coach. You have your own business. You are an artist. You write songs. You're working on a show. Also, we're all learning how to shift and deal with this pandemic. So I know that I'm not the only one dealing with my own pressures and my own things going on. So with that being said, there are many people out there who are probably even watching this right now, and you're dealing with your own things. I want to talk about anxiety for a little while. Um, can you guys mention any anxiety that you've experienced during this time?
Sure. I must say that, I don't think any of us had any experience with a pandemic. I mean, we've heard about a lot of illnesses that may have affected other countries in the past, such as Ebola, and earlier when our former president was president. But it never really affected us in the way, we may have been, we may have encountered Zika, just hearing things, but to experience a global pandemic, and where, for one, science didn't know anything about it. That was absolutely new, because most often when we experience illnesses that may threaten us, science at least has some type of handle on it. But this time it was totally different. So the fact that the experts don't have it, have a handle on it, that was anxiety provoking, right? And so, as a result of it, we saw people getting sick and not knowing how to manage it. Jobs were shut down, so the uncertainty of how to even provide for households, the uncertainty of, when can I go, what can I do to avoid being sick? If I get sick, will I get well? And what is the long-term effects of this pandemic? All of those very valid questions led to a lot of an increase in anxiety. So
Absolutely.
the agency that I currently work for, we give anxiety assessments, and those assessments, unrelated to the pandemic, but were influenced by the pandemic, right? We saw a great increase in anxiety, and it was across the board. It wasn't just one population of people, maybe people who've been diagnosed with anxiety disorders. No, it was across the board. And to be honest, I had my own anxiety. I had a 3-month old when the pandemic started being broadcast and published. And so my thoughts are, how can I keep myself safe so I can keep my baby safe? And so those are anxiety provoking thoughts just there, just with the pandemic, not all the other things, just the regular life things that may be anxiety provoking, but just with the pandemic. And then we started learning that the African American population was disproportionately affected. And we know there's history behind that, the lack of access to healthcare resources, the distrust of the African American community for healthcare providers, and not just as that it's a distrust, but it has been a genuinely earned distrust.
Absolutely.
We know that the medical community has not treated us fairly, has not always been ethical towards us, as evidenced by the Tuskegee experiment, and just all type of things that has led to the distrust within our community, the lack of access to resources, and all of those things compiled met up in 2020, and we saw where our community was losing more people to this virus than any other population. So it was a lot of different things that increased anxiety, and for people who may be predisposed to um, um, increased states of fear, increased states of worry, just regular thoughts that you can't break free from. Um, this was a rough time. So those are for the people who, so we saw some people who don't struggle with anxiety had an increase in anxiety, and the ones who do, it was rough on them as well. So this has been a challenging time, and we're still in this challenging time, because now we're faced with, okay, do the kids go back to school? If they go back to school, what does that look like? So it's a lot of uncertainty that is heightening the anxiety. And again, if a person or people already diagnosed or predisposed to anxiety, then it has been an even more challenging time. So,
So Frank, tell me about some of the anxiety that you may have experienced during the pandemic.
Well, I definitely feel like a plethora of the things that Dominique stated, we have in common.
Yes.
I also like to consider some of the things as being a working artist as
Yeah.
myself. I'm used to traveling. I'm used to performing. I'm used to having the opportunity to be in different places, uh,
Absolutely.
which
Mm.
can feel you could almost feel like you're in prison a bit, because if you're used to traveling, you're used to being around, you're used to being able to go and to come and to be in another state and to be in your house for like 3 days and then back on the plane and somewhere else and moving around. For me and for a lot of creatives that are used to that type of life, this is the longest we've been home in a long time. And you get to face things about yourself that you didn't know existed because you're always on the run. So you never had to look at those things. A good friend of mine who is a popular artist in town expressed to me that they were going through so much depression
Hmm.
because this is the first time in 5 years that they've been home more than 7 days in a row. And I didn't even think about that. When you're used to, so even though you're in love with the person you're married to or you're in a relationship with, even though you love your children and your family, some people are used to not having to see them all day throughout the day. And then when that time has shown itself to be relevant, you realize, like, I don't even like the person I'm married to, or
Hmm.
I
Wow.
don't even, because we're experiencing parts of ourselves that we had never had to see before, which also kind of segues to ageism. I know with me, along with some other people, it's like, wait a minute, time is really ticking. I cannot believe that the year is almost over. We're in the eighth month of the year, and I'm ticking, my birthday's coming up, and I have not been able to accomplish this or do that or do the other. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Everything has changed. All of my plans have changed. The way I go about business has changed. So I've had to constantly come up with creative ways to be successful financially and successful just in a intrapersonally within my own self. So these anxieties are very present. Um, and if it wasn't for some of the tools that I have had from having therapy, counseling, reading
Yes.
books, doing self help things, taking time to get to know myself, I know personally that I would have fallen apart a long time ago. And unfortunately, there are lots of people that do not have those tools. So I'm very grateful that we're here today to talk about tools
Absolutely.
and to align with people that, you know what, you are not alone in feeling these things. It may
Yes.
seem like I have it together, but I'm still dealing with those same pressures as you.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that, because I know, and I'm going to segue into ways that we cope with anxiety during this time, right? I know when I was a child, my parents or my loved ones, my guardians would say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But they would never give me an alternative to something for a solution. And I'm a solution minded person. If you tell me and we talk about this problem, but you don't give me a solution, then I'm going to figure it out the way that I know to. So that's why we're going to talk about the issues, but we're going to also talk about coping skills, the way that we've gotten through. For me, with the everything going on, some of the things I do to cope with anxiety is I pray, uh, I sing. Frank knows he's a singer. Dominique knows she loves music. She's a worshiper. Singing is so therapeutic. It's so healing. Music in general, to
Yeah.
me, is a healing too.
Yeah.
I meditate on scriptures, on affirmations.
Yeah.
Um, I like to write. Writing is so therapeutic and has such a healing property for me.
Mhm.
I'm at the point where I release my feelings. I don't just hold that stuff in. I believe that the root of anxiety for me is, or a definition for me, it's a build up of emotions and feelings and things you haven't said or things you needed to release, and after a while it just overtakes you. So I'm at a point where if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I pray, I'll talk to God, or I'll talk to someone that I trust. I'm gonna get another counselor with everything that's going on. People like Dominique, who is trained for those kind of things. I'm a counselor in training. I'm in school for this. Guess what? I'm gonna get a counselor, and I'm gonna talk about these things because that is, to me, that's how sickness, stress, all of that building up. That is how mental illness, anxiety, depression,
Right.
suicidal thoughts. That is how it comes about. So
I,
that's only a few of the coping methods for me. But go ahead, Frank. You wanted to say something?
I was thinking that one of the things that I find is a definition of anxiety, a recipe for anxiety is the need to be in control.
Ooh,
And I think for me,
that's so.
um, what I have worked on a lot during this time is I've given myself the permission to unlearn things that I once, well, this is the way this should be, and this is the way that that has to be, and this, because all of those things, once I started losing the idea of having to be in control of my thoughts and having to be in control of my environment and my outcomes, then it automatically creates a valve to release that pressure. And I don't have to feel, I said before this show today, I've released my expectations,
Yes.
even for myself. I don't have an expectation to look good or to be great or to know everything or to be perfected. I'm present and I'm listening and I'm willing to be wrong.
Absolutely.
I'm willing to be wrong about what I think I know. And I think once you introduce that to your soul, I'm willing to be wrong, then you're pliable. No matter what direction the wind blows, you're not so hard faced that it has to crack. The wind blows and you crack because you're hard faced. I'm flexible. So wherever the wind blows, I'm able to kind of maneuver and move with it and still be in complete form when that wind stops blowing. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think,
Dom, I want to ask you that next, but I had a talk with Frank before this, and I believe I shared it with you. Before this conversation started, I felt so much pressure because it's such a big topic. And I know a lot of people are experiencing it, but I felt like, especially with something that happened to a friend of mine recently, um, I felt the need. I could not get on today and just talk about a creative process.
Hmm.
I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Wanted to talk about this, and I just felt the pressure. I was like, oh my God, I have to be right. I have to research. I don't have enough time to do all the research, all the studies,
yeah,
putting so much pressure on me. But honestly, I had to cast that care on God. Yeah, that's why I have professionals. That's why I have other people on here to help me to bring this conversation to life. So I love that, friend.
Yeah, we did talk about that. And I think part of being successful does have an element of planning things and being excellent, operating in a spirit of excellence, and almost being in control. I know I've been called a control freak several times, but I agree with Frank that. At this time, I think maybe even since I had the baby in December, I've had to learn that it's okay not to be perfect and not to have it 100% correct, but to respond and to be present in the moment is also important. I don't want to say that it's most important, but it's essential as well to be present in the moment to respond for whenever the crisis occurs. So oftentimes, in the work that I did, I worked in crisis for 4 years,
Okay.
where I worked for Metropolitan Crisis for 4 years, where when people were experiencing crisis situations, some type of mental health emergency, they would call and we would pick up the phone. And one of the most important responses to a crisis situation is just to listen. And so we don't have to have the right words. Oftentimes, people just need to feel heard. And we don't necessarily have to have a specific formula, but oftentimes if people feel heard, that is therapeutic in and of itself. For it to be an open vessel, to be supportive to the person, and to allow them to release whatever they've been holding on to, is therapeutic in and of itself. So I'm glad that you responded and that you gave yourself permission not to do all the research, not to have it down, have all the facts down. Imperfection, but to respond and to open a space for more conversation, to eliminate the stigma, because we have a big stigma in our community about
Absolutely.
mental health services, and that, not telling anybody a business, and that's for white folks, that's for crazy folks. No, it's not. It's for anyone who needs help, and everybody needs somebody to talk to.
Right.
Absolutely.
And not just Jesus. We
Absolutely.
right, we need real people that we can reason together. Even when we consider, the scripture says, come, let us reason together. We need to be able to reason together and to talk to someone, and to bounce ideas around, but also just to get the release that we need. If all we need to do is talk about what we're going through, and know that who we're sharing it with is a safe person, someone who's not going to judge us, who's not going to share what we're sharing to somebody else, to laugh at us, get killed. But we need those key safe relationships to be able to manage life. Life is not necessarily easy, and not especially for our population. We have been traumatized generationally. We have been oppressed. We have been discriminated against. We see, like you said, mentioned earlier, George Floyd, the trauma from seeing another unarmed black man killed at the hands of the police. That's huge, and that's big, and we need to have spaces to process these traumas, and these anxious thoughts, and these depressive thoughts that we have, because if we do not process it correctly, then it can move across the spectrum to a more severe situation, and then we'll see the acuity of what you need increases. So these conversations keep people out the hospital. These
Absolutely.
conversations keep people um, from doing taking more drastic measures, feeling hopeless, and um, uh, not committing suicide, like you were mentioning earlier, that your friend, you heard about your friend, and that was a measure that we're seeing an increase in our community, in the African American community. Often in the past, but we've seen an increase in suicide and suicide attempts in the African American community consistently over years. So we need to get our heads out of just the Bible, and really process this thing so that we can save lives.
It's
Absolutely.
interesting. I'd like to bring up a perspective about that. And again, this is my experience. So
Mhm.
it is all that and it is none of that at the same time. You know what I'm saying? It depends on how you take it, or anyone takes it. But I do feel as if within the African American community there is an influx of suicide and in our community, because we have been removed, and we are being removed from the fundamentals of blackness,
Ooh, yes,
which
I agree.
and whereas there was a part of our life that we kept some things in our culture, uh,
Mhm.
like for instance, the concept of respect for elders,
Yeah.
or the concept for dignity, not presenting yourself outside of looking and presenting yourself in a position of looking well. I'm not saying that that's good all the time. What I'm saying is that there was a time where we would take the time to look clean. We would take the time to look sharp. There was a time when we would do that. And now when I look at current generations, it's just ratchet everywhere. Savage. These are the words that we actually use to refer to ourselves. I'm a savage. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Actually. I mean, I am not a savage. I am not trying to be a savage. We have taken these words. We are no longer working for the good of the Black community individually. These were concepts that we used to live upon. And again, they have the really good side and then they have the really ineffective side. But I feel like just tossing it out completely has led to certain behaviors that are degrading, that involve self deprivation, and that eventually lead to suicide because we no longer have the rudiments of Blackness as a staple in our community anymore. We have adopted principles in our culture that were not customarily Black. And now we've lost a part of ourselves as a result of it. It used to be a time where a Black person could come up to you, if they were your mother, your auntie, your uncle, or not, and say, I know you're not going to talk like this on the street. Where your mama at? I know you're gonna pull your pants up. I know you're not supposed to be standing on this corner with all these boys, young lady. You know, young man, why would you talk like that to in front of a young woman? You know, there was a time where people would walk past the church and walk across the street with their drink in their hand, or would walk across the street with their cigarette. But now, none of those things are in play because I think we've gotten so loose. And I think one of the byproducts of that is there's no accountability within our community. No one is everybody's afraid to ask, are you all right? What's going on with you? I'm just calling you because I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. We get like highly offended. How you gonna call me? You don't know what's going on in my house. We used to walk up to our auntie house, cousin house, knock on the door. What's going on in there? What's going on in there?
Yeah.
I'm seeing these posts on Facebook. Something wrong with you. Tell me what's going on. We don't do that anymore because it's like, it's not my business. I don't want to get in their business. But then the result of it is then they're gone. They've had a suicide attempt or they've hurt themselves. And we were right next door.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
You know, this is just my observation. Again, like I said, I'm not saying that it's true or false. I'm saying from my perception, I think that this is a byproduct of us losing our Blackness.
No, I definitely agree with you. I actually have been having some of those conversations where we've lost a sense of community, and there's always been strength in the community. In that, even the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, that's an African saying.
Absolutely.
That we have adopted it as African Americans, and that was that strong sense of community at one point. But things have changed where we have people that don't want to be accountable to anyone else. Yes, that is absolutely the truth. That we have children that cannot be reprimanded by adults. Children are not being taught by adults, or even though adults, children may be adults, still feel like, grandmother can't tell me anything. She raised our children with, and so while I like to say parents are not perfect, but they are human, and we get to see the humanity of parents. It may not be perfect, but there is something to be learned from the elders. So I think that's an excellent point, that we have assimilated a lot. We have gone into spaces that were traditionally for other people. We worship like other people. We go to school in different communities. We don't even have schools in our community that the community's children go to anymore. They're being shipped all over. So that strong sense of community that we once had is decreasing. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist anymore, but it is important for community, and our worship tradition is important.
Mhm.
When we assimilate, we do lose some of our identity. We do lose some of our strength at
Mhm.
times. Like you said, it's some and it's all of it. And
Yeah.
so, speaking from an African American faith counseling standpoint, I think it is important to still, even if we worship with mixed races and things like that, to still tap into your inner tradition as well.
Yeah. I'd like to
Good.
piggyback on that if I can, Angie,
Go
if
ahead.
you're okay.
And then we're gonna move on to another topic. Go ahead.
Right. When I was younger, I'm obviously I'm a very expressive individual. I'm an artist. I don't believe that there's one way to do anything.
Mhm.
And I believe everybody has autonomy. But I also believe that there's power in a critical mass of people working in a certain direction or a certain philosophy. Growing up in church, I grew up in a time where, you had to dress up to go to church. You had to put on you had to put on your church clothes.
Yes.
You know, right, your Sunday best, whatever. And while that tradition did constitute and foster classism in certain ways and a idea of perfection, I have better shoes than you, have better hats than you, have better whatever. It did do that. However, there's something else it did. It helped restore and build dignity in a group of people. And black people were always known to dress up and look spiffy and clean and sharp. And even if the man worked Saturday night until 12 o'clock in the morning in the ditches and he was dirty, one of my uncles, he was a hardworking man. On Sunday mornings, when this man would get dressed, you wouldn't even know that this man did hardcore work in the week. He would be so clean. It was something I aspired to be. And I realized that now that everything has come as you are, we have lost the sense of aspiration to be anything greater because it's just like, nah, I'm gonna just be me. I'm gonna just be me. But the problem with just being me is, what are you lifting? What are you reaching for? What are you going to become? We can't just be stale at I'm right here. What are you polishing yourself up next to? That's a positive reinforcement. And I think that element, because it continues to make us apathetic. And the more apathetic we become on that tonal scale, it just leads to death.
Hmm.
I don't care how I look. I don't care how I feel. No one cares how I look. No one cares how I feel. I'm all alone. I don't. It keeps leading to these places that there is no value for oneself. Even though we know it's not done externally, those external components play a part in building an idea about ourselves. And I wish that we would restore that. And I see so many artists bringing that back in some level. We've got to bring a balance back. It can't just be ratchet all the time. That you have to be more dimensional, multidimensional than just that component. I feel like that is the only representation that's showing up for us. And the byproduct is self-harm, is death, is bummy life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think a lot of what you both said just now contributes to our younger generations who are coming up, our teenagers. A lot of them, I have conversations with a lot of teens, and it's so crazy how the music, some music talks about anxiety and triggers and depression, and it's like trending for them.
Yeah.
In my mind, sometimes it's very trendy for them to say that they're suicidal, that they're depressed. A lot of them are being raised by people who have those broken thoughts
Yes.
and unstructured thoughts of blackness and community. So therefore, we're raising up kids a lot of time who are hopeless, who
Yes.
are depressed, who don't have a sense of self, who don't even have a thought of what they want to be. I spoke to a young teen recently, and I know that the rates for teenagers suicide and depression is rising as well, because a lot of times our communities, our schools
Yes.
Their parents, their family members aren't pouring anything into them. So
Yes.
now all they want to do is give money, be a
Yes.
savage, classy, bougie, ratchet, all of that thing. They want to twerk. They want to go on fashionova.com and get the latest, but what are they looking forward to? So
Right.
you all made a lot of great points, and that leads me into the topic of depression, because so many people deal with depression, not just because of the pandemic, not just because of racism. Recently, like, I've always known that I've dealt with these issues, but I guess I lived in my little bubble because I wanted to protect myself from this world. But not because of just racism, but sometimes it's trauma from your past. It's um, inner thoughts, things you've dealt with, or things people have placed upon you. It could be chemically induced depression, etc. I know personally for me, after Katrina, I didn't realize what these terms were, but I dealt with PTSD. And because I was uprooted from my home, I had to go to a new city, new area. I didn't know anybody. I'm a very emotional, empathic being. I'm sometimes a loner, but I have friends. So I had to uproot my whole entire way of doing life was uprooted. Just like for a lot of these people going through the pandemic.
Right.
Shift. So I remember I had a very hard time readjusting to where I was. Long story short, I was a senior in high school, made it through, but then my mom and them, I ended up going to UL Lafayette, uh, the University of Louisiana in Lafayette. And my mom and my stepdad, we were all out there together, but they had to get back to the city to fix on the house and handle business. So I was left out there all alone. Didn't realize I was dealing with depression. I was dealing with PTSD. Again, I was a popular loner. Everybody knew me, but I stayed to myself. I was going to a lot of parties. People knew that if I wasn't at a party, something was wrong. But I didn't realize that I was dealing with depression. There were times where I could not get out of bed. I skipped. I missed a lot of classes. And I've never told anybody this. I missed a lot of classes. I flunked out of school because I was such a funk. I remember the room was dark. I didn't eat. My mom literally had to call the RA, and she bust in my room. I was mad at her, but she bust in my room because I wouldn't answer the door. So people are going through things, and sometimes people are suffering silently. So I want to start talking about depression, because oftentimes depression leads into suicidal thoughts, and sometimes people go through it. Right? So um, talk about depression, y'all. Dominique, do you have anything you want to say about that topic?
Yeah, I just like I like to think mental health existing on a spectrum. I also think that depression does as well. Depression is diagnosed on a spectrum based on many different factors. You can have a depressed day, or it can last over months, over years, and so things can you can have an acute episode of depression, or you can have chronic depression where it occurs for a long duration of time, and determines the severity of the symptoms also determines the diagnosis. So all of what you mentioned earlier are actually the criteria that we kind of gauge if you can be diagnosed with clinical depression and the severity of it, and where you are along the spectrum. So oftentimes people really don't understand that when your sleep patterns change, when you want to sleep more or you're not sleeping at all, when you lose your appetite, when you're just feeling down, depressed, and hopeless, those are signs when you're isolating, like you mentioned before. Those are signs of depression, and depression can occur multiple different ways. It can be situationally started, such as an event, but it can also have a substance. When you mentioned college, it kind of put me in a space where a lot of college students, it's their first time of freedom, and so they experiment with substances. But there is substance induced um, uh, mental illness, substance induced psychosis, substance induced depressions. So I would urge any young person who's watching this to be mindful of trying out substances to cope, or just to um, uh, hang out with friends or whatever. You just never know your biological, your chemical makeup, how it's going to respond to these substances, because you would assume that you're just going to have fun like everybody else, but you cannot guarantee that. So then you may have substance induced reactions and responses to the substances. But depression, I think, when we consider ourselves, the African American community, we are the targets of a lot of situational things, oppression. We are targets. We live in concentrated poverty. We live around people who don't have much at times. The majority of us don't have access to the same opportunities to get ahead, and that's by design. Oftentimes, it's by design. So, all things being equal, anybody who would experience what we experience as a group, as a community of people, would be depressed. However, I think we have, for generations, have had functional depression. We just go to church and we kind of get that feel good, and it gives us the ability. We worship, we hear a good word from the pastor, and it gives us the ability to kind of just manage, but not really resolve the depression. And so I think it's important what we're talking about now. Depression, like I said, you can just have a depressed day, and that's not what we consider clinical depression. So in order to determine if you have clinical depression, you definitely need to see a healthcare provider. Particularly, yes, the primary care physician can diagnose depression, but you want to go to a mental health professional in particular to diagnose mental health professional. And if it comes to it, not be afraid to take medication to kind of balance those chemical levels if it is necessary. But you want to also make sure that you keep in mind that is the last. That's the last frame of reference. That's the last tool in the toolbox. You want to do the counseling. You want to process. You want to do things differently. And if it does not change, if your symptoms do not improve, then maybe pair the medication with the counseling. But they go hand in hand. Just don't take the medication and not have counseling, because you're still going to struggle. You're still going to struggle.
Right. Also, I feel as if going back to what I kind of stated in the beginning, it's a metaphysical thing for me, which I think we're all saying. Like, there's an element of the scientific part that I believe is 100% valuable, but I also believe that we live in a time the era that we live in right now is the actual era is narcissistic.
Ooh.
You see, right? The era, like, and we all are a part of it.
Yeah.
We all are part. We may operate at a high functioning level. We may operate at the low side of it, but we live in the era of perfection for the regular person. I'm in the entertainment industry, so I'm not only creating, I'm sitting in meetings on how to reach people, how to market it. And one of the things that we have found is every regular person in the world that lives in Timbuktu has a desire now to be famous and be a celebrity. That wasn't always the case. It was literally like, oh, those are those famous people. And now it's like, no, I'm a model too, but you're not, but you want to live that way because not only are you exposed to it, but the rest of the world around you expects it from you.
Mm.
I mean, I look at young girls that are like 14 and 15 with weaves that are and lipstick and lacquer and nail and I'm like, why do you know how to walk in high heels? Because it's not just on her. Because that 14-year-old, if she goes to school with just a natural hairstyle and a natural look and just as a girl, then the boys there that she needs as a part of her social environment won't even look at her.
Mm.
So now she's ostracized for just being alive and as who she is. So what does she have to do? She has to do the things that will allow her to have social stimulation so she can even be involved in the social environment that she's forced to be in. So now you have stripper culture
Mm.
leading feminine culture. Like, wait a minute, stripper and feminine culture is not synonymous. It's stripper culture, and now all women have to be in a stripper mentality. I look at these people, these guys, like, oh, she could do this for me. I'm gonna make her do that. That's like coming from a pimp culture.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And then the females like, I'm gonna take care of him. I'm gonna hold it down for him. That comes from your man being a drug dealer and you being the bottom. You know that word, the bottom. That comes from that culture. But they're 14, they're 13, they're 16.
Huh.
So what are you going to do when you get to college? If you get there, because you're like, I don't need to go to college. I got to make this money. I got to get this money bag. That's stripper, pimp, dope culture.
Yeah, I also think the age that we live in is also the comparison culture. Right? We stay on social media and
All
we
that.
compare ourselves to what the next person appears to have. And some of the things that they appear to possess that we wish that we possessed, such as money, fame, they appear to be happy. When behind closed doors, that may not be the case at all. More than likely, it's not. So that's a good point.
Right. And even with that, I like to just throw an idea on top of that we are, in my experience, again, it's minimal. It may mean a lot, may not mean anything. We're not really getting online to compare. We're getting online to win and to be presented as the number one.
Absolutely.
Comparison is the methodology that we use to win. It's a piece of that puzzle, but the disease is narcissism because and we use comparisons as a tool, as a symptom. It's a symptom of the disease. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, if a person is saying, I have a headache, my back is hurting all the time, and you're taking pills for the headache and the backache, but you have cancer. Stop taking Tylenol. You're taking Tylenol for the symptom. The disease is you need radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery to remove this cancer. But see, we've been treating the symptom. And the thing is, we are being born in narcissism. Like, I'm being funny here, but I'm going to just say it. I remember a time growing up with some babies. Somebody can be mad at me for that. Some babies, not yours, Dominique, because I know you're.
Mine is cute.
Let me tell you. I
think I already know what you're about to say. My baby is cute.
I remember there was a time where people would say, man, that's a beautiful baby. And the reason why they said that is because all the other babies were not beautiful. Everybody's baby is a Gerber baby now. Everybody's baby is perfect. And
Yeah.
and I'm joking, but it used to be a time when it's like, oh my God, you could be a model. Like it used to be like, you could be a Tyra Banks, you could be a Tyson. No, no, now everybody's Tyra Banks.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a perfect physique, and it's not for health. Everybody got a Dolce and Gabbana this and a Escada this and a Ralph Lauren this and a Roberta Cavalli this, and everybody has a Versace shirt here. How? How do you? How is everyone high in fashion and we all still renting?
Okay.
How is
Wow.
that? How is that possible? It's because the name of the game now is not be smart, because that was a time where it was about brilliance and how who was a philosopher and who was the smartest and who. Now it's who looks the sexiest, who makes the most money, who is the social influencer. I'm so tired of it, because what they don't understand is that is a trend. And when it's over, you're very valuable during this time. But when that's over, you're not going to have any more value. And we're seeing that now. A lot of people that were social influencers, no shade to flat tummy tea. I might need some myself, but everybody's like, my flat tummy tea, I'm so thin. Oh my God, get into my body. Well, guess what? You're not a social influencer now. You know who are the social influencers now? Social activists.
Yeah.
People that are actually up for the cause, and you made a lot of money during that era, and people were like, well, I could just make money online, but you have no marketing experience. You don't even know what a trade-off is or opportunity cost. You don't even know what profit is, because that was a trend for fast, quick money and fame. But it ends, and it's going to only belong to the people that have taken the time to master the actual skill.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think we're both saying much of the same thing, especially, but if we even look at it from a spiritual standpoint, pride was the original sin, right? So we just see where people reinvent themselves more and more and again. But at the root cause, which you said, not looking at the symptoms, but looking at the root. When
Yep.
we look at the root, is certain levels of pride as well,
Yep.
and so pride unchecked will lead to states of depression, will lead to anxiety, will lead to some of the mental things that we encounter in the mental health profession. So yeah, I think those are very valid points.
Even if we don't know it, because I don't want to,
Hmm.
because I have suffered from depression, and I've had therapy. I haven't had to be medicated, but I've had therapy. And one of the things that I kept finding out when we kept getting down to the root of things, the bottom line was it was a pride, it was a version of pride.
Wow.
It's a version of pride. Like if you'll allow somebody to do that you trust to do the spiritual surgery on you, you will get to see what the root of it is. Because it's like, I'm depressed because my dream's not coming true and I'm working hard as everybody else. I don't know why this is happening for them, and they're not a good person. Well, let's just dissect that. First of all, who do I think I am to think that I own my life?
Mm.
Who do I think that I am to think that I own the life? I am a steward of this life. My life belongs to God. I just manage. It's like it's the person that owns the apartment complex versus the leasing agent. The leasing agent doesn't own the building. I don't own this building called my life. I'm the leasing agent. I tell you what time it's open and closed. I maintain the property, and the owner, God, says, you did a great job with this. I'm gonna let you be the owner of two. I'm gonna give you something else. But
Yeah.
when we start thinking that I own my life, I own my outcomes, I could be whatever I want to be. You're right. You can be whatever you want to be. But what is the cost? If you are what God has called you to be,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it is really different.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's also important what you said that you went through your own process. I've gone through my own therapy as well, and it's a continual thing. I have a therapist, and so even though I facilitate this process for a lot of people, I also have my own facilitation, and so I have continual review renewal examination of my own self. And so it is important, like you said, to have a trusted individual. I think part of the issue that we've experienced in the African American community is, yes, the distrust, and that, oh, that was for white people. We're just going to pray about it. God knows, and we're just going to talk to the Lord. And so traditionally, maybe counselors and mental health professionals did not look like us, did
Yeah.
not. But now we have people, and in that they did not look like us. They did not believe what we believed, and so they would try to maybe eliminate the spiritual aspect from the entire process. But we as individuals, we know that we are body, soul, and spirit. So we have to address the spiritual aspect. And so in finding someone trustworthy, doing the process of counseling and to really dissect and analyze and get to the root cause of what's going on, I think it's important to know that there are professionals that also are Christian, that can also speak the same language and help facilitate the process to accomplish the goal that you want to accomplish. And it does not have to take you outside of God.
Yes.
So some of us that are in the field understand that, I don't want a counselor that's not going to address my spiritual standpoint. That's one of the most essential parts of me. I'm very aware of my spirituality. I tap into it. I try to tap into it daily. I try to start my day with God. So it's important to me to have someone to facilitate the counseling, healing that I need, and not negate my spiritual side. And so I just, want to encourage anyone who's listening that you can get into counseling with someone who's going to validate your spirituality, your spiritual desire, if you choose to live your life in a certain way because you believe that it pleases God, and that you don't have to explain what that means. That some of us are going to be like, yeah, you know what, I understand. You don't have to explain. And so that's why I really wanted to be present on this, and I thank you for inviting me, because people need to see that the faces of counselors are not all the same. What we bring to the table and what we're able to help you facilitate is it varies. And so some of us are equipped to talk about God in the African American perspective.
In the African American Christian perspective,
in the African American Christian,
you may not subscribe to Christianity and still be African American, and there are counselors for that as well. We should just be, in my opinion, hoping for people to be healed. Period.
In my classes, there are many different kind of counselors with different beliefs. I have my own set of beliefs, but I'm learning to respect others. And that's one thing you learn in the counseling programs. But as Dominique said today, that there are counselors out there who are represented just like you. There are Caucasian counselors, there are African American counselors, there are counselors of every color, every belief system, but the point of today's talk for sure is that your mental health matters. I'm so glad that they came on, and we're going to continue the conversation, but I just want to remind you that your mental health matters. It's not, we're taking the stigma off of mental health, having conversations like this. And mental health is so broad. That's why we are venturing through many different conversations and many topics, but it's important to have these conversations with your family members, with your friends, within your churches, within your communities, to bring the awareness that mental health matters, that it needs to be maintained, that it needs to be taken care of. That it's okay to seek a counselor. It's okay to say, I am not feeling okay. I'm feeling off today. It may be just because you are busy and you have a lot of things on your plate, or it may be that you have some things going on that you need to seek help for before it spirals out of control. And that brings me to the next topic, which is suicide. Now, this, I know it's taboo for a lot of people, but it's becoming even more prevalent with our communities within our nation. I mean, it's been around for a very long time, but we see it more than ever happening. With even a TV show or a Netflix series, there was 13 reasons, and it explained it was 13 reasons why this girl committed suicide, and she recorded the tapes. And I heard after that particular series came that the death rate by suicide spiked within teens. You know, people are talking about it. I mentioned earlier, they're talking about it in songs. Um, I've just heard it thrown around so much. And again, a good friend of mine recently committed suicide. And that's the whole reason why I'm having this conversation today. Um, I will give a personal account for myself because I feel like it's freedom time. And I feel like a lot of times we've gone through things not just for ourselves, but that can help other people. I did mention earlier that I dealt with depression. And oftentimes suicidal thoughts and the act of suicide comes from feelings of depression or being hopeless or all of those things. And during that time, I did feel hopeless. I did need help. I did not have a counselor. There were stigmas around mental health and counseling and pursuing that kind of thing because back then, I'm not old, but back then the thought was if you want to go to a counselor or whatever, you're crazy or something's wrong. And that is not the case. I think we live in a time more than ever that some people make mental health trendy, but it's more acceptable. And I'm letting you know that it's okay to pursue help. But anyways, back to suicide. I was in a place where I just was very hopeless. I felt very hopeless. I was in a very dark space. I had dealt with a lot in my childhood, in my life. And when you don't deal with that kind of trauma, those anxieties, those thoughts, those broken belief systems, all of that, it stews together like a gumbo and it festers up and eventually it overtakes you. If you don't deal with your issues, if you don't deal with your traumas, if you don't deal with your anxieties, it eventually eats at you and it takes over. So I had gotten to a place in my life once upon a time where I felt hopeless and I was just ready to end it all. Thank God that I didn't go through with it. The information is at the bottom of the screen. I actually reached out to the suicide helpline. A lot of times when people are suicidal, it's a cry for help. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want someone to listen. I didn't feel heard. Maybe because I often my way of coping was to suffer in silence. You know, um, many people want to be heard. I was looking at some stats trying to prepare for today, and um, when it comes to suicide, men are more likely to commit suicide more than women. But when it came to a certain method of suicide of jumping off the bridge, most people had a change of heart. The survivors, people who have survived, reported a change of heart as soon as their foot left the ledge. So a lot of times when people are in a suicidal state, they just want to know that someone cares, that someone's listening or love them or understand like they don't actually want to do it. And again, I even though I've been in that state of mind, suicide is not um, a solution. It's a temporary solution. It's it's a wait. It's a long term solution to temporary feelings because just like the weather, feelings change.
Mm.
And I thank God that He preserved me and He kept me from making a long term decision from temporary feelings. So I'm going to allow them to speak. But if you are watching this live today and you're having feelings of hopelessness and you maybe you lost your job due to the pandemic and you can't make ends meet, or you have pressures of life, or you have some trauma that's coming up that's making you feel like this is never going to end. I'm telling you, I am your living witness that things get better. It does get better. You don't have to take your life. You don't have to commit suicide to make it better. Things get better. I'm telling you. Just hold on in there. If you need to talk to somebody, the number's at the bottom of the screen. Please reach out to them or talk to someone you trust, a loved one. Get a counselor. We have a counselor on right now. There are counselors out there who have been professionally trained. I'm being trained, so I'm on the way for you one day. There's help. You don't have to do it. So, with that being said, uh, let's talk about this topic of suicide. Uh, Frank, as an artist, we are and a creative, we are
Mm.
feeling.
Yeah.
My God, I am an empath. I feel things.
I'm so glad.
Um,
I'm so glad you said that creative thing because it reminded me of a lyric. There's a song by August Alsina, and the guy from the Waltz group. I think his name is Darrell.
Pharrell, yes.
Yeah, they did a song together, and I pulled up the lyrics prior to this. I just want to read this one part. He says, Darrell says, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You created the creatives, and you know everything that we need. God, give us peace and give us strength for the journey. Refresh our minds and restore our time. For death is chasing us when we want life. Lord, please keep our minds, for we know that everything that lives starts in our minds. So please hear our plea, overwhelm everything that's overwhelming me." And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, somebody said it. Somebody finally said it as it really is. When you are a living creative, like all of us that are alive are creatives, but when your purpose in life, which I mentioned at the beginning, when you know that your purpose is to create, I know that my job is to create.
Yes.
I know my job is to create and not for me to always benefit from the creation.
Ooh, that's good.
And that's a place I had to come to because you create all of this stuff and you're like, well, I don't have a Grammy for it. I don't have a lot of thousands of millions of dollars for it. I don't have fans for it. It must be worthless. That's untrue. And what happens is you start thinking to yourself, well, what's the purpose of me even creating? And I'm a creative and I'm supposed to create, but I'm not benefiting from it. So there's no reason for me to be here. That's the pattern. There's no reason for me to be here. I must be broke. I must not be working. I'm not useful. I can't get anything right. I'm just taking up space. I'm a burden to everybody. You know, I know that space because I've been there twice in my life where I was at the point where I was like, you know what? The first time it happened, ironically, the first time I wanted to commit suicide, truly, not just wanted, but was in action, was over 10 years ago when I was on Sunday's Best.
At the height of your life.
Yo, this is so funny because everywhere I go, people are like, oh my God, I loved you. Or they're like, oh, I hate you, whatever they were saying. But this was at the moment of the dream that I wanted. This was the time where I wanted to just end it all. Because at the time, I just felt like I can't please the church people. They ain't never satisfied or happy with me. They're like, you ain't saved. You don't look saved. You don't think saved. You're too smart to be saved. Whatever the case was, I wasn't accepted there. And then when I would go into the secular world, they're like, you too churchy.
Mm. Mm.
You what? So I just got to a place, and this is when I learned, when I see people having a suicidal moment, a suicidal thought, I can click in and go, I know where you are right now, because contrary to what one believes, you don't get to a place of being over like, ah, I'm tired of this. I can't take this anymore. It's not that. It's like you go there and then all of a sudden you become very still and you have nothing. I have nothing. I don't care what happens. It's like it's so high, you just like there's just nothing coming from you. You don't feel anything coming out, and you don't feel anything coming in. You're just ugh. And the second time I experienced this was was I was putting out an album. I was putting out Capricorn. I was writing it, and I just told God I wasn't gonna take my life, but I was sitting in the parking lot off of Clearview and Veterans, and I was crying because I was so tired. I was like, I'm so tired. I'm just tired of this. Ask me what I'm tired of. I couldn't even tell you. Just tired of trying to stay happy, trying to make everybody else feel okay, trying to still have hope, trying to be my best, trying to reach a goal. And I just sat there and I said, okay, I'm done. Take me. Just take me. Take me. I can't do this anymore. And I remember praying that prayer. I was like, if you don't do something, you better do something. I mean, I was out loud, I was cursing, I was like, where the F are you? F and do something if you're a God. Do something. Where the F are you? I'm keeping it real with you all.
Yeah.
I was like, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? I've done everything you told me to do. What you gonna do? Show up. If not, take me out. I'm done. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And right then and there, my favorite artist of all time is Whitney Houston. And this other girl, Chanel from Trinity 57. She used to be the lead singer of this group. I don't even, my phone wasn't even on,
Oh, no.
but I was sitting in the car. Those are my two favorite vocalists. And it just came on. It just came on. And I heard her voice, and I had lost all my feelings. I had gotten so like, all of a sudden I felt alive again because I couldn't control my emotions. My emotions came back. And I was like, okay, I can do this now because I realize I don't have to have the answers. I don't have to win. I don't have to be on top. I don't
Yeah.
have to be in control. That was the break for me. Now I'm gonna tell you this. That was the break then. I pray, I go to counseling, I do all of those things. I pray I never reach that moment again, but I'm not foolish enough to tell you that I won't,
Yes.
because it's an ongoing thing. I'm not fragile. You can't tell me something bad and I'm gonna just lose it. Don't be afraid. But I am telling you that just like I am capable, you are too. There's a part of me was like, I can't believe I'm even having these thoughts. I felt ashamed.
Absolutely.
But the reality of it is, I do not feel ashamed for telling the truth.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so that's my take on that. Like, and everybody that's listening out there, you could be the most successful person, you could be the most spiritual person, you could be a healer, you could be changing people's lives. You still are made up of the same thing everybody else in the world is made up of.
Absolutely.
Free
No
yourself.
one's exempt. No one's exempt.
Free
Yeah.
yourself from thinking this can't happen to me. Free yourself and just say, you know what? I need help. I need help. And if anybody laughs at you or talks badly about you, they need help too.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
if they were in their right mind, they wouldn't even think like that of you. So go get the help. Tell somebody today. Reach out to me. Reach out to Dominique. Reach out to Angie, and just say, you know what? I don't know what to do. I need help. I may not know what to tell you, but I can refer you to something. I just want you to look at me. You see these great moments. You see me with these celebrities. You see me on these red carpets. You see me doing these concerts. You see me blah blah blah. So what? Doesn't mean anything. I need the same help you need. I go through the same thoughts you go through. I've been there. I get it. And if it wasn't for knowing that God was with me and having people I could call that said, you know what? I think you're really tired. You haven't slept in days. You just moved back to New Orleans from being gone in LA for 7 years. You're going through a culture shock. You need to sit down and just allow your mind to balance. I was like, oh, oh, okay. And it changed everything. So that's what I can add to our piece.
Good, Frank. And
Yeah.
what I said to myself, why I wanted to have this conversation and let people know that your mental health matters, is because it doesn't matter who you are. Just like you said, you can be a millionaire. I've seen millionaires take their lives.
Down.
I've seen you can be as rooted in God, and God is definitely an anchor. But I've seen Christians and Jews and Hindus take their lives.
Yes.
I've seen people who seem like they just had it all together on the outside take their lives. It doesn't matter who you are. Your mental health matters. If something's feeling off, reach out to someone.
Yep.
I keep
Yeah.
saying the thin line between sanity and insanity, and it can happen to anyone.
Yep.
It can happen to anyone if you don't take care of your mental health. If you don't practice self care, we didn't even get into self care, and I think I'm going to continue having these conversations as well. Self care, knowing when you need to take a rest or tired, just knowing yourself and caring for yourself. A lot of times, Dominique, I know you have something you need to say.
Yeah, I agree with the both of you. I often say the same thing, that there is a thin line between sanity and insanity, genius and insanity, because oftentimes, and I know this is a space for creatives, so I do want to affirm what y'all are saying. The same side of the brain, the right side of the brain, is where emotions are processed, but it also is where our creativity is processed. So it is quite intertwined. That's why we'll see that the most creative people are sometimes the most emotional people, and vice versa, that they're tapped into their emotions. That's why they can write such beautiful love songs, can create such beautiful things, because they understand, or they may have more emotional, in touch more with their emotions, just because those are processed on the same side of the brain. So I think that's important to understand. I think that part of humanity is that we have extreme highs. We can be on top of the world. We can accomplish this and accomplish that and do well. And then we can have those extreme lows. We can have the pits where we are really at a point where, you know what, I really don't see a point in going on.
Yeah.
A part of my story is that I was sexually abused as a child by a family member. So I felt like I was in a hopeless situation. Now, I don't recall ever for me feeling suicidal, but I was definitely homicidal. And if it was not for the grace of God, I was literally planning that thing. And if it was not for the grace of God that, you know, grabbed me and just caught me in that plotting, I don't know where I would be. And so the thing about suicide is that it comes from a place of depression and a sense of real hopelessness, that I have no hope that this situation is going to change. I have no hope that this situation is going to be better. I have no hope that that I matter, that I have worth, that I'm here for a reason, that anybody cares about me. that's where those are some of the roots of the thoughts of suicide. And what we have learned is that men are more likely to actually complete suicide than women. Women are more likely to be diagnosed with depression than men, but men are more likely to complete suicide.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things about suicide and depression is that oftentimes before a completion, oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes before a person is successful in suicide, they've had attempts after attempts after attempts. So they kind of work their nerve up, or they work themselves up to actually completing this thing. And so that's why it's important for us to talk about it and bring awareness to it, because otherwise we'll see an individual or groups of people attempting and just trying to refine that plan, that process. Unfortunately, that is what occurs. At one point in history, African Americans were thought to not be sophisticated enough to experience anything other than happiness. That is written in the academic literature, that we were incapable of experiencing any emotions besides happiness. And so that's why when we talk about mental health and suicide, in particular in the African American community, they'll say that's white people do that. No, we're doing it, and we've been doing it, but we have to dispel some of the myths. And so what I want to do is that, because we know that suicide is killing oneself, and so we have to be comfortable when with using that word and asking that question. Oftentimes we'll ask, are you thinking about hurting yourself? No, we need to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? Because hurting yourself is very vague, and that also it pertains a lot of different things. But killing yourself is killing yourself. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It's something that if you see the following signs, I want to bring up a few things that I thought about in my years of crisis training. When I worked, we were trained to kind of probe these kind of questions. So be mindful. Keep these thoughts in mind if you feel like you have a loved one that is struggling, or even if you are fitting some of the criteria. This is not an exhaustive list. It's not if you experience one, you're definitely suicidal, but it's for consideration.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes, when people have been considering, I'll say, the risk of suicide increases if people have a prolonged history of clinical depression, if they have a history of past suicide attempts, if they have a history of substance use, if these are things that if you monitor, if people are giving their belongings away, telling their loved ones, their friends, goodbyes, if they're talking about death a lot more, if talking about death seems to bring them happiness or a sense of calm or peace, then it's possible that they're contemplating suicide. If you notice that an individual may be isolating more, Angel, you talked about that, where you were isolating more. If an individual is isolating more, if you notice personality changes, if at one point they were really pleasant, happy-go-lucky, and then all of a sudden they're depressed all the time, they may be more negative, then coupled with some other things, it may be an indicator that they are suicidal. What else did I think about? So I want the things that I did mention, I want you to keep those in mind, and that if there is an individual in your life that you are concerned about, it could be a neighbor, it don't have to be your relative, it could be somebody that you work with, there are resources available. Angie has the resource, the suicide talk line, scrolling, but we also have more local resources that I want to give you. The Metropolitan Crisis Response Team are available 24/7. You call 504 826-2675. I'm sorry, I had to remember the number from when I worked there. You call that number and you can tell the person who answers the phone what you're noticing from the person that you're concerned about, or if you are that person and you need to talk to someone about your thoughts of suicide and you need additional support, then there is a local immediate support for you. Um, Also, there are some additional steps that family members can take. A lot of times we don't want to be hospitalized, but sometimes hospitalization may be necessary to stabilize and to get that support that you need. So let's not be afraid of the resources that are here. There are ACT teams available. They come to your house and do some work and to check in with you and to provide that continuous support around you. So all I'm saying is that we, at one point, thought that suicide and mental illness was for white people only, but the literature is suggesting that within the last decade, suicide attempts and completion, especially with our African American youth, have doubled than generations before. So that is an alarming statistic. When the opioid crisis came about, and our Caucasian folks noticed that their kids were overdosing, we named it the opioid crisis. We didn't. We got some help. We got legislation. We got in the ears of our senators. We got in the ears of doctors and all of that. And so there's additional support. So let's not continue to just brush this under the rug and act like it's not affecting us. And that prayer is an awesome tool. Everyone who's on this call right now, I'm sure we all share the same thought that God is able to do anything, but God also places people in our lives that can help. I think I mentioned this in a call a few weeks ago, that when you have a heart issue, you go see the cardiologist. You're not just going to sit there and have heart palpitations and your heart beating out of control, and you notice that it wasn't like that last year, and all of a sudden you have this issue. You're gonna go see about yourself. If you know that your blood sugar is high and or low, and you're passing out and all of that, you're gonna go to the doctor and you're gonna take your insulin. You're gonna take whatever they prescribe to you. You're gonna follow the doctor's orders so that you could get better. So I'm encouraging you now. If we can go to the doctor, we need to be able to go and get mental health treatment as well, because we have a generation that's dependent on us to demystify this thing, to destigmatize this thing, and to take it seriously, and to also understand that we can have God and counseling. We can have Christ plus counseling. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can exist together. And so it's important. Again, Metropolitan Crisis is 504-826-2675. I gave y'all some things to look out for, and hopefully, don't sit on it. Get yourself some help. Get your people some help, so that we can walk in health, and wellness and wholeness.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, y'all, I'm so glad that you all answered and agreed at such a late moment. I just wanted to shift this week's episode. Y'all, thank you so much for joining me today. And like I said, mental health and the topic of mental health and mental illness is such a broad topic. We only touched the surface. I'm going to have you both back for more conversations, maybe about mental health, maybe about your endeavors, but you'll definitely be back. I just want Frank, give your last few thoughts, and then we're gonna let Dominique give her last few thoughts. I'll give my last few thoughts, and then we'll wrap this conversation. So go ahead, Frank.
I just want to say I'm grateful to be here. One of the things that I have learned to do is to let go of my expectations and to just be clear about my purpose, and not my purpose for my whole life, but just my purpose for today.
Yes.
That has really helped me to live a more joyous life.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Thank
and
you.
I know you have to go, so if you need to go,
You guys. I have to teach a class, and I appreciate you all.
No problem.
Take care.
No problem.
Bye bye.
Nice talking with you. Have a good one.
Dominique,
Yes, Angie.
thank you so much for being on, girl. You're so, I just love what you're doing with the Christ Plus counseling. I pray over your future endeavors.
Thank
Let the people know where they can reach you because you have your organization now. And then your last thoughts.
Yeah, I am on Instagram, but I want to kind of shift to, since this is a more mental health conversation, I'm going to focus and to direct folks to follow Renewed Minds Wellness on Instagram. My final thoughts are I worked on the crisis team for 4 years, and then I went to a more intensive unit for another 2 years. And traditionally, we think that mental illness affects other cultures, but I'm here to tell you that it's affecting us as well, and so we have to be equipped. And so the power of this talk is to bring awareness, but also to equip us with tools, with things to look out for, with tips to look out for, with coping skills, with all of that. We need to continue to have the conversation, but don't just take what I've said here. Go and get your own individual counseling. Go and work that out with someone. Go and get down to the root cause of whatever you're experiencing currently or in the past. Some of those things you have to unpack, and getting a strong support system is extremely important. So we just want to continue to end the stigma of mental illness and promote mental wellness in our community, especially the African American faith community.
Absolutely.
Thank
Well,
you for having me.
thank you so much. And I just
Thank you.
wanted to say that I want to thank you for tuning in today. Um, if you are that person who's dealing with those feelings that you can't quite label what it is, or you're feeling a little off, and rightfully so, there's a lot going on within this world right now. A lot of things that we may not even understand. Um, Go out and get that help. Dominique mentioned some really great resources that I'm going to have on the screen. Reach out to her via her Instagram page. It's scrolling at the bottom. If you need more resources, I'm a counselor in training. I may not know everything right now, but I can point you to people like Dominique, or I can point you towards resources. Please, please, please take care of yourself. Please know that you don't have to kill yourself, that you don't have to commit suicide. There's help out there. Besides Christ, there's counseling. There are mental health professionals. This woman has gone through school and is still going through school to be able to fully be equipped to help you.
Yeah.
People who may need help, people who may need to just feel understood. There are people out there. I'm telling you, you don't have to take your life. You don't have to take your life. I was once hopeless. Yeah, I've been through a lot. She's been through a lot. We've all been through a lot. I'll tell my testimony another time, but I am still here, and you're still here on purpose. It may be to help someone else, and that's why I did this whole conversation to help you. So thank you so much for being on. Thank you for tuning in. The resources are on the screen. Reach out for help if you need it. Until next time, thank you so much for tuning in. Bye bye.
Bye.